Welcome to MoneyMark Experience. We're here today with Mr. Adrian Dunkley. He is the chairman of Starapple Analytics. He calls it sometimes Starapple AI. He's a cool young entrepreneur, one of the youngest entrepreneurs right here in Jamaica. We're going to talk to him today about his experience in business, and what data analytics is all about. Especially right now with COVID-19 and the pandemic and everything that's happening, there's been recent reports to say that the whole world and business has been fast-tracked. Adrian, welcome to MoneyMark Experience and today's show.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good.
Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. I like your cap. It's cool.
Thank you.
You're casual. You're a young entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And you're doing it.
Yeah.
So, as a chairman of Starapple Analytics, what does Starapple do, and how did you come up with the brand and the company name?
Right. Okay, so Starapple has 3 lines basically.
Uh-huh.
We have Trainalytics, which is focused on upskilling individuals in areas of analytics and AI. We use a very unique methodology, so one that be as practical as possible. So we use actual use cases within an organization.
And before you get there, what is AI?
So generally speaking, AI is really the study and development of machines that are able to think. We use quotes on think because a big thing is what exactly it is to think. We want to develop a machine that can make decisions at the level or above the level of human beings.
And is it replacing humans, or is it maybe lowering companies' costs or providing better products, or how do you really distill that in a simplistic way?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I know it's a big concern now in a lot of different areas. I view it more as a supporter of human innovation and efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
But I will admit there are going to be certain jobs that are going to be phased out.
Right.
That is the most dangerous non-technical jobs that don't require any form of human creativity are the ones that you leave towards AI. And leave other persons to focus on the more creative and innovative positions.
Yeah. And so do you view it actually from a customer standpoint, do you view it that it actually AI contributes or has the ability to create a better customer experience?
Yeah, it can. It can also make a worse customer experience if you don't apply it properly.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is it's really an approach that's really based on how humans use it. Right? So you can use it for good, you can use it for bad, or nothing or something in between.
Right. There, many years ago, I was in the UK and I went into a Barclays bank, and it was like almost like a video game. There was a very few staff, but this was way pre-COVID. Do you see that now? Although COVID has fast-tracked some of this, but going into some of the banking halls there, even the security dealers, you're seeing so much, whether it's work from home or you're seeing some feeling of emptiness. Do you find that kind of Barclays impact, or using whether it's a Bank of America impact pre-COVID is starting to now, hit us in Jamaica?
Yeah. So it was definitely there before, but COVID has definitely accelerated the use of analytics and innovation and robot automation as well. So the idea is you don't necessarily need to go into a company or a specific location to do a certain transaction, right? Where analytics comes in is it allows you to improve how you offer your services to clients, your current services, as well as create new products and services before you reach the point that your competitors already get to the market. So that's really the value of applied analytics right now.
And some businesses have benefited from COVID in a good way, and some businesses have thrived. You look at Mailpack, for example, logistics, maybe this pharma. Some of the food businesses, persons are genuinely having to cover their family food costs before anything else, any leisure expenses. When you look at like Dairyman and Grace Kennedy separate as well. Okay. Is Starapple one of these companies? You're private now, so the public's not going to see your numbers, but are you benefited so far from COVID?
Yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, you don't really selective benefit from pandemic, but our clients have seen the need and the value in focusing on analytics in a very mature way. So that's allowed us opportunity to go in there, use cases and experiments to show them what we can get from it.
But are you seeing some increased demand? Let's say that maybe your financial numbers are up a bit more, whether it's on your revenue side or your EBITDA side.
Well, It's a bit biased. So we actually started right before the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have a way forward no more to compare it to after. So all we've known is pandemic life.
Okay.
So the hustling has been
As an early stage company, a business.
Right.
And when did you start Starapple?
We started in the beginning of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a very young company.
Yeah.
So are you just hitting kind of your anniversary period now, or are you kind of like a year and 2 months?
We're in anniversary already.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, it's around the end of December was our anniversary.
And going back to earlier, how we all know what Starapple is, and fantastic fruit, etc. But how did you get into wanting to use this brand or use it? I mean, there was a well-known restaurant in Hopewood at one point called Starapple Restaurant, but how did you come across the name? I mean, why did you decide to use it? Every entrepreneur loves their brand, but what's the whole background and story behind you picking a name?
Okay. So that's really my grandma. Thank you very much, Grandma, for that. So I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She brought me a Starapple and just to cut it open. So all I really see is this big purple thing. Brown, no big deal. So when I opened it up now, you're seeing the star patterns inside. So the idea is, with our company, what we're going to do for you is uncover the patterns, insights that you may not realize are there, work with you to actually materialize them into value competitive advantage, and you prepare for the future.
That's deep. So and data analytics, analytics is a very deep field.
Yeah, so the idea with analytics is you're really trying to take data, either raw or money data, and then convert it into useful information. And you emphasize the point of useful, because useful can mean different things to different persons.
Is it as complicated, Adrian, as people make it out to be? Because once you step into a boardroom or just even a social conversation, I mean, it seems nobody wants to talk about data, or data is just 4 letters, but it just seems like it makes a nice social evening boring, or it just sounds complicated. What's the real story with it? Is it as complicated as people make it sound?
Yes and no, but the idea is our entire world is run on the use of data. You're feeding into big data repositories on a second-by-second basis. When you use your phone, when you drive your vehicle, all of these things. So it's really how you present it. It can be boring if you present it as being very boring, but when you focus on how it impacts persons' lives and the value, the story associated with it, you see that it's extremely interesting. So if you name literally anything right now, I can tell you what data is associated with it and how to improve it.
Excellent. Yeah. And in Jamaica, from your perspective, are we accelerating with data, whether it's Jamaica or the Caribbean?
Yeah.
Or is there still some, a few walls, a few obstacles to accelerate the usage of data?
Mm-hmm. We are accelerating. There are some issues. So the main issues are around the accessibility of the data.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not like in North America or in the UK or those other European entities or countries. So simple example, JSE. Let's say you want to pull down the last 50 years.
The stock exchange.
Yeah, stock exchange. JSE data, right? There are going to be some difficulties around
because they can now say to us, how many investors are millennials. I mean, they always, the CEO there or the managing director always comes out and says, like 10% are now investors of the population versus just 2% however long ago.
Right.
Would that classify as data usage, or are those just general terms?
It is a use of data, but it depends on how are you applying it to what you're doing as an end user. So in that particular case, you may be interested in the age groups of individuals investing because they're a financial entity that wants to target those persons that will have more disposable income, for instance. Or maybe you want to put in some public policies where you get more people invested in the stock exchange or private investment. There are all different ways that you can really tackle it. But the main thing is accessibility of the data.
Mm-hmm.
Democratizing certain data sources is needed to really push the actual use or application of analytics in there.
Got you. And how did you come up with that idea? What was this from your professional background? You've worked with financial services, you've worked with other multilaterals or government agencies, but how did your current dream? How did you spawn it? Where was it born?
A couple of years in the making, really. So the main thing is I saw a gap across all these industries I worked in, local and internationally. So yes, financial entities for one, but also in manufacturing, tourism, and other areas. So that is, how do I plug this gap as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible? So the first idea was to look for persons.
Gap in private sector or in public sector? In both.
Yeah, both.
Okay.
So how do you plug the gaps? The first thing is identify what the issues are.
Mm-hmm.
So the issue was really around individuals understanding the value of the data and then understanding how to actually generate value from the data that have access to. So my thing was, you can't go out and look at international entities, let them come in and train and these type of things, which is fine. I have no issues with that. But there's value to developing specific products and services related to data in your region. So that is to make a Caribbean-based understanding and deployment of analytics and value. We don't talk the same as they do. We don't have the same culture necessarily. We don't focus on the same things. And if you want representation
Yes.
in data and in products, then you need to develop it at home.
Is your company Starapple? I mean, are you touching any Caribbean contracts yet? Any other countries? Are you doing any global work yet, or are you Jamaica focused right now with plans to do that? What's the status?
So it's primarily Jamaican contracts right now, but also some work in Trinidad and also some international contracts. But we're doing a lot of work with SMEs. So we're actually supporting around 15 to 20 SMEs.
I mean, in Jamaica, like just small, mid cap businesses or startups.
For free.
When you say supporting, meaning doing what exactly?
So market research, product testing, customer analytics, digital media.
Market research being, okay, you're selling to, I don't know, your products or you're marketing to this, whether it's this group or this demographic, I think you should be looking at this or, I don't know, these parishes in Jamaica. Or give us an example.
So that is, you come to us and say you want us coffee, for instance. You want to know what are competitors in the market, what's the type of coffee in the market, what's your competitive advantage, what's your value add versus a competitor, and then how will you design your business model around that using analytics.
So is it like a much more focused SWOT analysis almost?
Yeah, and I did a little bit more involved in it. So a lot of experimentation. So the benefit of offering service to SMEs and startups is they're hungry, especially with the pandemic. They're more open to trying different techniques and approaches that they not have necessarily tried. And as I mentioned, they're looking for free.
Any kind of agenda there? I mean, even if it's a positive way, is it something where Starapple wants to invest in some of them? You want to get into private equity as Adrian Dunkley, or is there any type of thing where maybe you're getting some sweat equity stakes, or is it just really you're being a goodwill ambassador? You want to help Jamaica and you want to help these young guys and young girls?
That makes it too, because me starting this company about 12 months ago, right? There were issues obviously involved. There were roadblocks, there were concerns. So being there is also working on development bank of Jamaica. So
that's some of your history.
Hashtag DPJ.
Yeah, no problem with the plug if you want to go plugging. No issue with it.
Is around social enterprise and access to financing, right? So you have a very good understanding of what's needed in the market, but then you put yourself in a position. I've been working in startups for around 6 or 7 years now, so I understand all the issues that can come about. And the first thing we start with is your product or service actually reliable? Is it meeting a need, a demand, and can it actually take you from the point of startup to, let's say, publicly traded, right? So we want to give these persons an opportunity. So all these companies have really been persons that have been run by persons who've been passionate for what they're doing, and that's all we're doing. So we say, okay, how can we help you? How can we provide you with all of the tools and things that you need to succeed? Eventually, maybe you want to do some investment, take some equity, but not in the beginning. The idea is just to provide enough value, make it easier for them to actually reach the goals that they want.
Understood. And sticking up in there, because you mentioned a really important point. With what you've seen out there, and as a young entrepreneur, you're in your early 30s, how difficult was it to finally make the jump and get Starapple launched? You mentioned some obstacles you faced. Is it that you're facing legacy issues? Maybe friends and colleagues saying you're crazy to go out on your own. You get a fear to a big salary from the financial sector because you've been with big name firms, public companies. Not everybody has had that benefit. Or is it just tremendously difficult to raise, whether it's equity finance, or money as a young business person in Jamaica?
Right. So it's a combination of all of those. So I'd say we've been extremely fortunate because again, 12 months in, it's not really a long time to do hustle and then to actually be net positive.
It's an interesting comment to make, and I get it a lot. We get it a lot on MoneyMark Experiences, on our platforms. Is truly young Jamaicans feel like it's not about necessarily raising equity or prefs or debt or whatever it is, but it's really about hustling because you're having to work day in and day out and make connections and try and raise funding, call it, or your funding requirement.
Yeah. Because
really, okay, I can go and get, we see a toaster on a 200,000 Jamaican grand, but what can I really, get going? I mean, you have to, as I said, you have payroll for 10 staff, but really there still is no, it's almost impossible, some might say, without being taken out of context, but it's very difficult to raise funding. Yeah. So that word hustling, it just comes up inevitably.
Definitely. Because even the first project the company worked on wasn't Jamaican based.
Okay.
It was a Trinidadian startup, interesting finds.
Mm-hmm.
And we developed some really good techniques around the formulations of wines and those type of things. But the main thing for me is really trust. So,
and how did you get that contract? Was it through marketing or just a connection? And that gave you cash flow, right?
Yeah, somewhat of cash flow, not really a lot of cash flow. Because the main thing was really just to test the business model. Really just marketing and then talking to individuals and understanding what the issues they're having. So we get feelers from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to vet them to see what is most appropriate for what we're doing and what value can actually add. So in certain instances, our services aren't appropriate for certain entities, either based on the scale or what specifically they're looking for, or there may not actually be a technology currently.
Did you do the typical, was it friends and family in the beginning, or was it just really your own savings and capital injected? How did you get this started a year ago?
Yeah, so it's really that. So self-financing, and that's really in terms of being grown up a certain way. So Thank you. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Understanding the value of savings.
They put these, value system in here about savings.
Yeah, save for a rainy day, and then I have a lot of experience in risk management as well.
So you really put your savings, or call it your nest egg, into taking a bet on yourself in Starapple.
Right, yeah, because there's definitely a value. I saw a gap of value and products and services I could offer in the market.
And a year later now, how you feel about it? You feel good about taking a bet on you?
Yeah.
Even if you had some cash burn for the first year, you feel good?
Yeah, I feel very good. Hungrier than before, actually.
And what's the best feeling about it?
Providing that value to the clients. A big metric for us is what's been the return on investment on the project that they worked on. So that's something that we track. So we ensure that that's as positive and as large as possible.
Any stressful stories? Any sleepless nights? Any fun, call it HR letdowns or HR issues? Anything that you can share that really was stressful in the first year of operation?
I'd say the first couple months with COVID, the uncertainty associated with that.
Because you started really with almost close to the first COVID case in Jamaica.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
So
okay,
we had a few contracts.
So you'll have a story for the rest of your life.
Yes, I will. There are a few contracts actually got cancelled. Right on the heels of COVID, right? So, but there's full understanding of why companies needed to buckle down,
like put things on hold or freeze. Yeah. Do you find interesting that those clients or companies have restarted or they've done those contracts, or are those still on hold? Let's say a year later.
We actually started. That's 5-6 months after.
Okay.
So it did pick up after, it was very fortunate.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Yeah. Do you find that the data analytics side or Starapple, does it give you a semi-decent read or a good read of what's happening in the economy? Because you depends on your client base, you're seeing who's spending and who's not spending.
Yeah, so we do a lot of market tracking in terms of what other companies are doing, listed and unlisted. A big metric that we use now is what are the data-related posts that are being put out there online, and use that as a general metric towards adoption of analytics in organizations. So we're tracking all of that right now.
What do you mean by that? Like Twitter posts or social media posts, or even data in companies?
So really, how many data-related positions, data analytics, data managers, how many of these positions are being posted in the Caribbean on a weekly and monthly basis?
Okay.
Which companies are doing it? What's the level of the position, and what are they looking for?
Yeah.
So we track those type of things to determine who to really target. Which companies would actually be willing to invest as much as possible in analytics in the organization.
Right. And when you say, Adrian, do you look at yourself as a data guru, or do you look at yourself as a businessman now, or how do you pitch yourself when you go out there, or do you kind of pitch the staff and the team as a data gurus, or what's you're in the boardroom with the elevator, how do you refer to yourself?
It sounds weird to say data guru. I'll take it if it helps us get a meeting and push our services. I'd say a big part is entrepreneur and data storyteller and developer of value. That's the main thing. So we try to make sure everyone in the organization has some understanding of data, analytics, artificial intelligence, even if they're not working directly with it. Yeah, so even our social media persons, they need to have a decent understanding of what we're trying to sell.
Yes.
And what's the value associated with that.
Yeah.
So
and to your point, any business, your product has to be in demand, or let's say, to get those revenues up. And do you feel where Jamaica is right now, regardless of the pandemic, but do you feel Jamaica's curve is ready for innovation and is ready for data, or you're going to have to use here as your hub and go and look for revenue, like go revenue hunting, not just in the Caribbean but globally, to really make it worth your while?
All right. Oh, definitely. Locally, Jamaica's ready. Jamaica's doing it right now. So there are a lot of unsung heroes of data. There are a lot of use cases that across a lot of organizations, right? So I am still treating Jamaica as a hub because it's the perfect environment to test certain things. Give an example: NFTs. They're really big right now. So we're actually experimenting with NFTs right now.
That's where, say, Jack Dorsey is now selling something for $2.5 million US, like his tweet. And what does NFT stand for?
So non-fungible token. So the idea is you're getting something, let's say a JPEG, a GIF, could even be a text document, for instance, and you're basically making it one of one using NFTs, really, right? But the idea is there is still a practical use of it beyond all these high numbers that you're seeing right now.
So that's huge in, like, call it maybe G7 countries, US, Europe. Is it big in the Caribbean, or you're saying the Caribbean is perfect for testing?
Perfect for testing.
Okay, and how so?
Look at Jamaica. Look at all the cultural value that we have over these decades for the small amount of land coverage, right? So we're a hotbed of not just Caribbean culture and creativity and artistry, but we're influencing other cultures and other countries and entities. So you could treat NFTs as a way for us to monetize and protect the value associated with these types of assets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. And how would you see, back to just revenue growth and looking at it? I mean, do you see yourself having to set up physical teams in other countries, or can you just do it all through technology in today's society?
I still need physical teams eventually through all the companies, because the main thing is you want that cultural influence across all of the islands and across all the entities.
Gotcha.
So that's really important to me. So yeah, you can remote work. It's important, but at the same time, you're still going to lose something if you're just in a Zoom or a Google Meet.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Is it face-to-face, like coming back to your comment on trust, is it face-to-face very valuable and important whether you're meeting a chairman or a CEO from a company, or can you do certain things and win deals, remotely on Zoom now?
I've had to. pretty much. We probably only had 2 or 3 face-to-face meetings when the company launched. I still miss something from that engagement, because one thing is you're in the Zoom meeting and they're staring here above you or beside you. You don't even know what they're saying. It's hard to read and understand. And having a set meeting in an area, so like something like this, the back and forth. So where we create value is not necessarily through that direct question that you asked us, but it's also that one-away's secondary concern.
Because you might have to explain things and how the process is going to work.
Yeah, because I say that, we're a consulting firm, but at the same time, I treat us more as a partnership entity, right? So it requires us to have a very good understanding of the business because you're the expert in that area. So whether you're developing wines or manufacturing or something like that, or if it's tourism or whichever area, retail, fast-moving goods, we rely on your expertise. The analytics cannot work without your specific business expertise and your understanding of your product.
And do you ever, although you're only a year in, Adrian, do you ever kind of second guess yourself and feel you could get a better valuation, or your time, you know, in data would be better spent somewhere else? I mean, when you look at Palantir's valuation, you know, and having Peter Thiel and some of these huge name investors, I mean, and they're getting billions of, you know, dollars of valuation, call it, and shareholder value, stakeholder value. Do you ever worry that, you know, if the obstacles don't fall away in the Caribbean, then you might be wasting your time, just because of how, you know, let's say non-traditional your space is, or you're okay with that?
It's never actually occurred to me. So the view initially starting out was, if we can't get it launched in Jamaica, then Jamaica needs more time, or we need to adjust how we're presenting the product. So let's look at other Caribbean entities, other areas or countries outside the Caribbean. See how we can offer the service, because data is all encompassing. It wouldn't say necessarily drives our lives in a lot of cases, but it's fundamental to our civilization at this point. And there's a lot of value. There's too much data right now for any one person, any one entity, any one country to really have a foothold and full advantage on what that data can provide and value from it. And it's always growing, it's always evolving. So data 5 years ago may not have been useful 5 years ago, but to certain people, because you didn't have the right person looking at the problem or the right environment or economy for it. But now it's extremely useful, especially with COVID.
And going back to your comments on revenue streams, when you look at that same company I mentioned, Palantir, which is pretty much, you know, one of those businesses, you know, just like Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, etc., that it seems to be all the rage in the US and the capital markets, stock markets. You know, they seem to be very simplified. You know, they have the G2G business or the government to government business, and they have the B2B, just business to business, like what you talk to a lot. And then they have some proprietary software that they sell, and they seem to be just doing very well. And they, you know, like even with COVID, they win the UK, like something like the UK healthcare contracts and install softwares, etc. How does your kind of business shape up? Do you kind of benchmark well to some of those global businesses in your boardroom, or how is Starapple structured to be competitive?
Okay, the simplest way to put it is, with you mentioning Palantir, I view Palantir as the company that creates infrastructure. Let's say for a highway, creates the communication across it, the toll booths and all of those things, and the wire and everything like that. I view Starapple as the people who come in and tell you how to drive the car and to give you that GPS to understand how to use those softwares and those products. We do have a research arm that focuses on maybe things that aren't necessarily practical right now, but we're hoping will generate revenue in the future. So invest a lot of time with that. So Palantir, to break it down, Palantir, you know, it looks great and everything, but they probably have a massive, back end, lots of programmers, because they're creating perpetual infrastructure and they're maintaining infrastructure. Yeah, so they're supporting us doing analytics, identifying patterns, figuring out how to make best value. So they're giving you the tools and training as well to use that.
Do you think it's something that Starapple would move towards in whether it's 3, 5, 7 years. I mean, I'm sure it costs a lot of capital. Whether you do it yourself or you need a large private equity investor, or however you kind of evolve.
Yeah.
But is that a part of your vision where you can kind of own the client more, kind of like what Palantir maybe does with the infrastructure, or you're still evolving at this stage?
We're evolving. We're working on a few things that would take us in that direction, but the idea is specific for the Caribbean. What does the Caribbean need right now to get it to be the international hub of analytics and AI? That's the main goal of
that's what you want to. And we do see that in the Caribbean with a lot of sectors. Financial services. A few others. Do you genuinely feel we have that capacity or ability to be that benchmark or to get there?
Yeah, I believe so. So we're a lot of creatives, right? And when you look at analytics,
very true.
Yeah. When you look at analytics, people may think you're on a computer typing or stuff like that, but there's more to the field than just an analyst or a data scientist or AI engineer at a desk. There's a lot more involved with that. So from entertainment and media standpoint, tourism, event planning, all of these things, and then like we mentioned about culture, art. Next month is actually our internal art month. So what we're doing for the entire month.
When you say internal, what do you mean?
Starapple. So we're doing an art month basically. So it's a internal competition where we're developing artistic works using different AI techniques.
Is that for staff morale and for things, or just, as I said, using the creativity that your staff has? Yeah,
and research. Because the idea is you learn all of these things, it's theoretical. You need to apply practical and see what the value is out of that. So it's important to us to not just apply these things when we're doing actual projects, but also in our day-to-day operations. Because you can't really go to an organization and tell them you should use these techniques and tools if you're not applying it to your own entity. Yeah.
Understood. And 3, 5, 7 years, even 10 years, where would you, as a chairman of Starapple, where do you want to see Starapple down there? Or do you want to be publicly traded? Do you want to keep it private? But where would you want Starapple to be as a business overall? How do you want to be perceived?
The influencer of a new market in the Caribbean. So we want to create basically a new support industry for analytics and AI that drives other industries. But the idea is we would have realized we did our job extremely well when we have other competitors in the market. We want to inspire, because again, no one entity can develop analytics and AI for the entire Caribbean region. So if we can inspire even 5 to 10 other entities across the Caribbean to set up shop, then we would have known that we accomplished what we need to accomplish. Other than that, we want to save 1 million lives with analytics and AI. How we're going to do that, we're not exactly sure.
You're talking about healthcare now, or what you mean?
Safety, healthcare, socioeconomic development, all these things. We want to be basically the entity that pushes public and private entities to use their data, use their insights, use everything that they've known to improve the lives of Caribbean peoples.
Anything you could give us more specific though? Like, you're talking about like reducing, car accidents, or you're talking more like healthcare at hospitals and making it more streamlined and smooth at public hospitals, or just how do you think you could achieve that? Yeah,
across all of those, as well as access to financing.
Okay.
So we're actually working
on... You mean like improve standard of living? You mean like in communities and things of that nature?
Yeah, to focus on crime prevention, these type of things. And then more with respect to financial literacy, we're working on a very specific project right now that the idea is, how can we help private entities confidently provide finances to persons that don't have as much credit info as possible?
Credit information?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? So how do we give them a tool that they can use to basically reduce their default risks, but at the same time improve number of opportunities for lower income, unbanked and underbanked individuals?
This is for like the bank's credit officer, or you mean actually the customer, like the person who's trying to access the finance?
So it's for both. So it's kind of providing a portal for those individuals that don't have as much or no banking information
Like
to get
like a fintech type of thing, or
yeah, kind of like that, but providing a service. So the idea would be we wouldn't necessarily be running that fintech, right? But we provide you with a tool that you can use. So for new entities that are coming out, the microfinance entities, providing you with a way to assess the risk and then plan for those individuals for the future. Because I believe that any financial entity has a responsibility to not just grant you an opportunity currently, but that opportunity should be spread out over decades, right? So the whole, from the point where, let's say you're 17, 18, to the point where you're 90 years old.
When you look globally, Adrian, and come back to benchmarking, and you think about it, there's some models like compared to Starapple where they don't ever want conflicts of interest, and so they just to your point, they actually don't take any equity stakes, or they stay uninvolved, and they just help the client. And there's other things where you say like a fintech, maybe Starapple gets some sweat equity or has a potential stake. Where do you see Starapple's model? Would you, whether it's help design or play a role in data analytics, but stay away from any ownership, or do you see Starapple having subsidiaries that might be in fintech, or as you mentioned, healthcare, or how do you see that evolving?
I'm open. So if we're filling a market demand and if there's revenue to be had, and we can
you're open at this stage to either one. You're kind of just early developing and seeing how where life takes it.
Yeah, I can't say no to anything at this point.
Okay, got you. And globally, what's fascinating with data is when you look at Barstool Sports, for example, the founder there, or the CEO there, Dave, he actually just got involved with a financial services company, and it's like an ETF, and I think it just launched on one of the US exchanges. And what it does, Adrian, is it just tracks like emotions of data, or like the most socially or social media liked companies, and that's what goes in and out of the basket. You think this is stuff that could happen in the Caribbean if there's a company like yours that starts to focus on this, or do you feel the gap between, let's say, the traditional banks or the traditional regulated sector and a company like yours is still too wide in the Caribbean, where that type of innovation is going to still take us a couple more years?
I don't think it's wide. Specifically for Jamaica, there's still opportunity for something.
It's called Buzz, I think. Buzz is the name of the ETF. I think that's the name of it, and it's doing well so far. Of course, got a lot of hype and business data, no pun intended. But the thing is that it's very much trending now. Where to imagine in today's world, but I think that's what COVID has done, where that is now kind of that's a way that persons are investing.
I think the biggest thing now is with respect to data privacy, right? You want to make sure that you have full control of how your data is being used, and if you need to, rescind that access to your data, which is a good thing. I believe that's the best way for us to be going as a nation. For things like that with an ETF, specifically using that type of social media data, in that particular case, obviously you would have to have some discussions with regulators. I said the first thing is go to the regulator and ask them, tell them what you're trying to do, put that some amount of NDA if you can relate to the conversation, but get their feedback before just kind of jumping. Obviously we know Jamaica's pretty small, so certain conversations and stuff will spread, but just start there.
But do you think do you think those are the types of things where a bank or a financial house would support those type of data conversations?
I think so, because really, we're developing a data product like that. It's where you're getting the data. Is it legally, can you legally access the data, right? But not just legally, morally, should you be accessing the data? So if you're taking everything to that and everything works well, then it's something that can be done.
Is data as simple as, my understanding from reading some of these articles is what they do actually in the US is they're analyzing, and I think it's public data, right? I don't think there's any data privacy issues. I could be wrong, but let's say if Facebook is the most talked about, tweeted, posted company, then that's what forms a part of the ETF. So let's say in Jamaica, for example, if Pandui is the most popular CEO. Let's just say it's an assumption. And Seprod is the most tweeted company, then that jumps out. But is there a way to analyze that now, in Jamaica? In other words, what are the 10 most popular companies? So it's not fundamentals, it's not earnings, but it's public sentiment. What are the most popular tweeted companies, liked companies on Facebook, liked companies on Instagram, and their CEOs?
Yeah, you can pull that.
You can pull that data because it's public, right?
Right. But the concern there is to ensure that the data that you're pulling doesn't have any personal information. So even though it's publicly available, they'll put their names in their actual names, their ages, potential.
You mean the persons who are actually liking it or their comments?
Right. So you have to ensure that you're not collecting that specific data about those persons. So anything that can be used to identify an individual is something you want to stay away from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an example of how, that's how they're doing it in the US now. They've created a product about it. It just listed on the US markets. I don't know how it's doing. It's just very recent. It's probably a small sample size. But those are ways that data can be used.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So that's a good spin on using public available data around sentiment. That's really interesting.
And for Starapple standpoint, are you using any publicly available data yet, or you kind of more operate on a contract basis? In other words, client hires you and then you kind of do what you got to do. Earn some revenues, use the data.
We do both. So a big part of it is experimentation. So we run one experiment a week, at least, across multiple different areas. So a big thing is we actually launched a apparel store, right?
Apparel store?
Yeah. So clothing. Right. So the cap and shirts and stuff like that. So that
you use some fancy words, but I know this is the data side.
All right. So clothing store, right? So the idea was initially, what are the first products we should put in the store? So we looked on social media to see what people are talking about. And we used that to narrow in on certain designs for the store and specific items that we should actually put in the store initially.
And this is kind of your market research, call it product that you can offer.
Right. But what's in the market, what people are interested in, and then what's the likeliness to sell? Who's our target audience? What's the general target audience in the market? And then how can we use that to push? Because you want as many revenue sources as possible, right? So, just experimentation is a big thing for any company to, especially with data. You have all of these piles and piles of data. Just get some people in a room and just talking about things that you can do. I'd say the only thing is make sure you have an experienced person who's worked with analytics, data analytics, and machine learning if you're going that route initially.
Right.
And then have those discussions responsibly.
Right. And Adrian, not throwing you under the bus, but you're a young Jamaican, you're a talented Jamaican, you're a bright mind clearly, and you've gone into entrepreneurism. Why do you think, from a government standpoint, right? And I know we also have, the university, I think we have Capri, we have PSOJ. Why don't we get more statistics yet in Jamaica? Do you find you might even get a call from government and say, hey, Mr. Dunkley, you have Starapple, come and help us. Does that happen to push Jamaica forward? There's a Big Mac index in the US, which is data at the end of the day. Why don't we have a cheese patty index here? In the US, what really makes markets function is every day there's statistics on Bloomberg, every day, whether it's 2, 3, 4. And it's what helps Americans, for example, or the world function. Not just the markets, but it helps people make decisions, to your point.
Yeah.
Why do you think we don't get statistics every day in Jamaica, or even at a minimum on a weekly basis? We're waiting 100 days sometimes, 120 days to get data. And the only thing we get in Jamaica is FX rate and inflation. Do you think it's something that you can maybe devote some of your time to, or give some goodwill?
Yeah, I'd love to. Give me a call. But I can't really.
And there's Statin to it as well. Sorry.
Yeah, Statin Statin publishes a lot of data, so I use a lot of Statin data for projects as well. Yeah.
Is it available to the public though, or do you have to kind of call a link or a contact?
It's available to the public. You can go on the website and
it's there.
Yeah, it is.
Do they publish it daily now or weekly or?
Maybe not that frequently.
Okay.
To your initial question around why we're not necessarily getting as much data as frequently as possible. So again, I'm not in all of these entities to fully know what's going on, but it could be down to infrastructure. Do we have the infrastructure in place?
You mean like the right people, or just enough staffing, you mean? Or
and the systems, the
or the
actual
systems,
like, IT
okay.
systems to collect it, verify it, and then push it out on a regular basis. Because you want to make sure anything that you're publishing is as accurate as possible.
It's accurate.
Right?
Yeah.
So you need an infrastructure in place to ensure the accuracy as well as protect the validity of that data that you're dealing with.
Understood.
But it's down to democratizing. So that's going to be like a full government push to get all of the different areas involved with doing something like that. There is definitely a lot of value in that, because the more data you have access to, the more you can use it to make better decisions on a regular basis. So that'd be great.
Because maybe one day, I mean, it would also help your business. I mean, it could help, as you said. You mentioned earlier that you think there's enough market share out there. So it's not about being competitive, but there could be 3 Starapples, 5, there could even be 10 Starapples, but you could really get enough market share. So you believe there could be a public sector, private sector partnership or collaboration, and it wouldn't harm the data. It could actually, if anything, help all of us as Jamaicans.
Yeah, you need different minds, different industries, different areas, different types of persons. You need full representation to make the best use of it. A big issue with AI now is the ethical implications associated with the use of AI. Because in certain instances, these AI tools are actually negatively affecting minorities in certain areas, right? And that's really because the persons who have been developing it don't have that context, that life experience to consider those things. They may not necessarily be doing it on purpose. They just don't really know any better. So that's where having Caribbean representation comes in. So we should be developing our own computer vision techniques to identify persons if we're going that route. Personally, we are staying away from anything where we're actually identifying persons based on facial recognition. That's one thing that we're definitely not going into. But let's say self-driving cars, for instance.
And the thought process there is that it could be biased, you mean? Or what's
could be.
Okay.
So self-driving cars. If you're going to drive a self-driving car that was developed on an American road, how is it going to fare in Jamaica, for instance? It's probably not going to fare well, right? So you want those type of things
like
developed.
You're going to drop in a pothole, you mean?
Potholes, certain vehicles.
The recent picture of some iron out the sidewalk, or?
Yeah, you need to have data very relevant to the environment.
For the environment,
Yeah, so that's very
country
important.
Specific. That's a great point. Yeah.
So we need a representation, and the best way to have that is to open up shop in the Caribbean and then just build from there. We can learn a lot with international partners because they've done a lot of the legwork for us.
Does Starapple have any collaboration right now with an international partner, even if it's advisor board member or an advisor partnership versus something where they're taking a direct shareholder stake in Starapple? So
nothing directly, but I'm also the Caribbean ambassador for a non-profit called Humans for AI. Not a plug.
What's it called?
Humans for AI.
Okay.
So the focus there is to develop AI tools, policies, and safeguards to be as representative as possible across, genders, ethnicities, areas, backgrounds, all of those things. So through that, there are a lot of connections. A lot of work has been done around how do we provide value in the Caribbean region as well as other regions that are misrepresented. Got it. Yeah.
In the Caribbean, we are huge on associations. Even if they're small, mid-sized, big. Yeah. Is there a data association yet, or AI association yet, whether it's the Caribbean or Jamaica? Because there are a few. You have a few competitors. Market research is probably one of the most well-known, although they might focus on a few areas. But is there an association yet similar to what financial services has, a lot of other sectors, JMEA, or that hasn't really happened yet?
I don't think anything well known across the Caribbean. Nothing that big. We're trying to work on a few things. So a big push is how do we get Jamaica to be AI driven, right? And then that driven by AI does not mean you just put some software and some machine learning models in place and then hope for the best. It's about sensitize individuals to the value of data and then upskilling persons. So eventually want to get to that point, but we're going to need to develop across the entire island. before we get to that point, I think. But
And to that point, how are you? Is that really just by winning deals, winning contracts, or are you having to do like public speaking engagements? Or, I mean, how are you trying to educate? Because that's a big question, I think, in everybody's mind. How are you trying to educate persons to get, AI or data analytics out there more? That it's not only a good thing, you need it for your business, but just educating society.
Right. So that's really the purpose of one of the arms of Starapple, Analytics. So it's around upskilling employees in companies in areas they already have experience in, to use data analysis, to use machine learning, to use different types of techniques to improve the efficiency, increase the revenue generation, all these things. So the idea is we're starting with these entities, and then from that now, developing the revenue now for specific initiatives we have around the sensitization. Okay. So around STEM, which work has been done locally, of course, and eventually want to develop a lot of scholarships, because the big thing is for individuals in the Caribbean, younger persons.
Yes.
They're not going to get involved in an industry that can't ensure them a paycheck, right? They need to see that there is actually some money associated with them investing their time in certain areas.
That is true. We're really not just a commission only, culture, or a stipend and commission. Yeah, we really need, more fixed benefits, etc. Yeah, understandably.
Yeah. And my thing is, I don't necessarily need it. I'll take on anyone if they have the desire and interest and that passion. I don't care if you have a degree.
You mean the hunger? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't care if you have a degree. I don't care if you're into primary school. It doesn't matter to me. If I really see that you're very interested and you'll be devoted to it, we'll take you on and we'll train you to be as effective because the big thing is being effective.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what we teach you if you can't apply it independently to create value. There's no point in us even showing you any of these techniques.
Yeah, that's great. And Adrian, you mentioned you've done Development Bank of Jamaica. You've done like a company like Mayberry, publicly traded financial services. So you've done a lot of formal companies, businesses, in your business. Where do you want to see yourself also? You see yourself going into, other businesses like a serial entrepreneur, or is this your main focus? But where do you also want to be in the next decade or so?
I really just inspiring the next generation to develop their own companies, products, value-added products, around social enterprise, and just enriching Jamaica and the Caribbean in general. That's really, I know it's a bit vague, but that's really where I see myself.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
It's great having you.
Okay, great.
That's it from MoneyMark. We just had Adrian Dunkley from Starapple AI. It's great having a young entrepreneur telling us about what business is like very much here in Jamaica as a young person getting it done. Thanks, and that's MoneyMark Experience.